Well, we're back. They didn't cancel us yet. We almost canceled ourselves. Zack's playing with the toy. Welcome back to week 3 of Alfred Hitchcock, where we peruse and dive deep on the 1950s run of The Master of Suspense. I am here with Zack Ford, who has a child's toy. Zack, what kind of children's toy is that?
It's a car, but it has like a foldable top.
Will you
It
hold
will
it
not
there?
stay up, so it just looks like a flat little truck
Why is
thing.
the top foldable?
Um, I don't know.
It's like a
So you
weird
can
thing.
go. I don't know. That's my answer.
This is
My
like a
cat
weird part
likes
of the
this
car to
toy.
fold.
My cat does pull it by the string.
Your cat
My
pulls the toy.
my cat is by far smarter than my son, still, and just a nicer person.
Zack Ford, who
No,
likes his
I
cat more than his
ranked
son.
my family.
Okay.
This hair, I ranked them in order of who annoys me the most to least. Uh,
I want to hear
um,
this. Drop the rankings.
so the least annoyance to me is Gertrude, who's my other cat who's small, but she's starting to she was knocking on the door every day. She's trying to ruin that spot.
Okay.
But mostly she's a chill cat.
Mm.
I put Sarah number 3 because I wanted to keep her happy. If I put her too high, it would have been a problem. Um, Theo's at 2 because he's a fucking baby. But my other cat, the one that plays with his toy, just like chaos in the making. He needs to be around at all time and like will randomly jump at my face. And just generally, it steals spinach when I'm trying to cook. He just like
What?
screams. He's number 1. Um, but Theo's trying to murder him every day. Just like pushes him into the ground, just like slams him down. So he's trying to get rid of this competition. Theo wants that number 1 spot.
Zack Ford's child is murdering a cat.
Then this
Um,
is the end of our show. Thank you for watching me rank my family and how much I hate them.
I just like the idea of taking a small number of your family and every week ranking them on a different characteristic. My dog is obsessed with apples, like to the point where if you have an apple near her, she's like, "That apple is mine. Please give it to me." And you're a jerk if you don't. But let us not continue our discussion down the child and cat rankings of the world. Do please
What
tweet at
happened?
us your own family rankings. If you have a
Cat,
family
cat.
ranking, please tweet at us. And Zach and me will laugh about it. We'll enjoy that.
Michael
But
Campbell, give us your family rankings.
yes, Michael Campbell will definitely write us an email ranking his family. But let us continue on to our favorite intro of the world. Last Letterboxd movie. Zack Ford, what did you log last on Letterboxd?
I logged His House. His House is a Netflix movie. I think it was at maybe at Sundance, but it was at some festivals early in the year. So before COVID hit, some people were able to see in theaters. It is. I'm gonna get cultures wrong. So, and it's British made, or at least takes place in England. It's based on refugees, I think, from the Sudan.
Yes,
That
South Sudan.
that just got placed in a house through the refugee program, and generally, kind of about them trying to, get used to in the way that they're like the people responsible for them kind of talk to them about like be one of the good ones is also patronizing, and automatically makes them feel uncomfortable while you're asking, trying to tell them to get comfortable so they can stay. Meanwhile, they start to see ghosts in the house that they were given, um, and there's a lot of it connects to a lot of trauma that they experienced on their way to get to England that they were never really able to let go of, and it was haunting them. What's great about this movie, and to me, the best horror movies, is it really cares about it dramatically and thematically much more than it cares about its horror thrills. Their horror thrills are definitely there, but it's there to help, um, you know, enlighten and make the dramatic elements heavier. It's there to, work in comparison or in, I'm forgetting all words. They work in hand with dramatic parts rather than we're going to get people scared in the movie. I do think that sometimes the horror elements go a little too far, but it doesn't take away from how good the story I think pays off. Definitely by the end, if you're patient for the end, um, the the emotional heft that's it's able to give you. Some people may find it a little maybe heavy-handed, but I found it pretty powerful, and I think it's an unsung Netflix movie that kind of got buried there that I want to encourage people to watch it. And I think also just like two of the standout performances, the two leads, are really, bring that emotional heft on the screen. You can really, just by looking at their eyes, kind of see all their pain and what they're trying to go through. So it's a good movie. You should watch it.
All right. Well, it actually does sound
Mike
really
Manning
interesting.
only gave it a pretty fucking good movie, but who knows what he's talking about.
Yes. So the last movie I logged was a Duplass brothers film called Jeff Who Lives at Home, which I remember watching this movie for the first time when I was like a teenager, and I saw, oh, it's a Jason Segel, Ed Helms movie. I mean, this is the, Forgetting Sarah Marshall and, Hangover. This is clearly just like a raunchy comedy. And if you watch the movie with that mindset, doesn't really work. So I did not like this movie initially. I recently revisited, and I feel like this has been a theme of recent episodes. When you rewatch movies many years apart, you often have a very different take on them. And so as a 25-year-old, you watch this like much deeper exploration of relationships and happiness and why we do certain things. And I just think it's a movie that if you go into it wanting some kind of deep exploration of relationships, and especially like the brother relationship is kind of explored a lot in this movie, you will enjoy it a lot. I think it's a really good movie, and I know Zack is a pretty big fan.
Yeah, no movie has ever hit me in the right time. Than this one that I like lined up with so many elements of the movie. I was 23 when I saw it, so I feel like it's really almost a post-college movie without it being
Mm-hmm.
about post-college people. Just that kind of mindset of being lost and confused what to do next. So, and it's also about brothers coming together after dad's death. I watched this like probably like 5 or 6 months after my own father died. I moved to Chicago because I had no idea what else to do at that point. I finished up a year internship, which is where I met Sarah, my wife. But I finished that up. She went to Puerto Rico for 6 months, so she was gone. I like was not in the mindset to apply for jobs because it was happening right upon when my dad was sick. So I decided to move in with my brother and figure it out from there. And my career outlets weren't looking great as far as with what my degree was from college of environmental studies. I want to do like environmental education and trying to figure out what was happening next. And that combination of dealing with grief, but also confusion of where your life is going to lead.
Mm-hmm.
That Jason Segel, I think, perfectly captures in the movie. And the Duplass brothers, are some of the best, melancholic filmmakers I feel like there are. It really helped me. It's such a hopeful movie with how it deals with that, with how you can get past that. I think it was. I definitely cried the first time I saw it when it's not really a tear-jerking movie, but just for those reasons, it really helped me move past some things in my life, and now I'm living the best life, guys.
I mean, I actually think I think there's moments in that movie that can hit you
Mhm.
in the feels. Yeah, it's kind of a really it just touches on like life can be hard sometimes, and I feel like a lot of movies don't want to touch on like it kind of falls in this weird gap between there's a lot of movies that want to talk about life at its best and everything going well, and then there's like the really sad, really bad ones about like look at the atrocities the world can rot. But Jeff Who Lives at Home kind of just touches on the more mundane grind and frustration and sadness that can occur just from stuff like, you know, your stuff's not working out. You want to get a house, your relationship, you think you're doing things right, but you're not. You're trying so hard in this area, but you're failing in this other area, or just like no one understands you, even if like, even if you're people not understanding you, it kind of makes sense because you're out on a limb.
It's
But
like
even like,
not just about like lack of ambition as much as it's like not even knowing where to start to have ambition, which is like a different thing. Like you like maybe want to aspire to something, but you just don't even mm, have a starting point. You're just so lost and confused and don't see much potential in what's you know waiting you in the future without it being like it's not about depression. That's what it makes it seem like. It's not that. It's just that melancholic confusion.
Jeff also does seem like he's a little bit on like the autism spectrum, which I don't think the movie touches on. He seems potentially on the spectrum just in the way his character like respond. Like he gets weirdly obsessed with like small details that most people wouldn't. Like he gets really like the name Kevin. He starts following things with the name Kevin, and that's kind of a.
Well, I think in some ways it's like how people claim on to conspiracy theories in the worst parts of their life. Um, is he's not going to conspiracy theories, but still going into looking into signs and ideas that aren't necessarily there because that's all he has to keep him moving forward. If he that's like the only way he has hope is thinking that everything is a sign. Which is
This
yeah
is
the same.
this is okay. This is going to go a very weird direction, but this weirdly does remind me of like conspiracy theories like QAnon, where like they predict a bunch of events happening, they eventually predict a bunch of events happening, and then the events don't happen, so that then they have to spin that to make it seem like, well, of course those events didn't happen. We really didn't predict that. We predicted that. Like that to me feels like his Kevin obsession. Like he's obsessed with these tiny, mundane, completely irrelevant details in the
Because it's the
world,
only way he can
but he
find a sense
needs
of
that to
purpose.
mean something. And that's the same thing that I think you see people go deeper and deeper into these conspiracy theories. It's like they need the world to have this order, even if the order that they think the world has is completely ridiculous and devoid of reality. But yeah, it is kind of like a conspiracy theory in that respect. Although his is the much more harmless version of that.
Yeah, yeah.
All right,
So
watch
it's a
Jeff
great
Lewis at
movie. We
home.
could have done a whole episode on Jeff Lewis at
We
home.
maybe
See,
maybe
even if
maybe
people who don't like love it, there's a lot I think to grab onto it with how it's doing emotionally. So
I do
give it a chance.
I do think Zach and I someday will probably do as a month topic like movies about brothers. I think that will end up happening someday. And I would not be surprised if Jeff Who Lives at Home ends
Yeah,
up
it's a
being
good brother
discussed
movie.
next. It is a really good brother movie.
And then we do
But
four brothers after that. Because why only have two brothers when you got four of them?
Seven Brides for Seven Brothers after that. We got to keep that. I don't like that movie. We're not doing that.
I like
That
it.
movie is creepy. The movie is so creepy and does not realize how creepy it is. That movie is like a kidnapping. That's like literally a kidnapping movie, and they can make it cute and like a musical.
It's a great movie for beards. Just having the whole families of bearded men.
Some of those beards are terrible. Like they're very so clearly fake. But let us continue on to our discussion of our main film, The Wrong Man, Alfred Hitchcock's film from 1956, which let's start where the movie starts, which is Alfred Hitchcock starts this movie by telling us this is a true story.
This is like foretelling his Alfred Hitchcock Presents, where he gets to be like a host to his own movie.
He really is. It is weird how he's the biggest star of his he's the director, but he's also the biggest star of his own movie.
You know, he's like the first one that as a could be a face that you can tie to a movie. The directors never really could sell a movie with their face and their reputation.
How many other directors have their movies referred to as on the cover of the movie, like almost as the title, Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho?
Maybe some. They're like Frank Capra's Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. I don't know.
I just feel like that's not that even now. I don't think that's a very common thing. People might refer it to as such, but I don't think it gets called it's that way in popular society.
No, and now it's just like an ego thing that directors put. You just get that with like Russ Craven, I think.
Yeah, that does happen. So this is a true story of a man who works as a musician who inexplicably is accused of robbery with, shall we say, circumspect evidence? No evidence?
No evidence. One person saying, "Hey, that looks like that guy."
The movie is very weird in that it is the proof for this guy's guilt is basically woman who is highly emotional and seems like she's about to faint, identifies person as robber. Like this movie it's sort of ridiculous.
Maybe that's how crime went in the 1950s. Was that simplified?
It is. There's a question to talk about like the race of this character and how that makes this movie very different.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to talk about how not fairly to this movie how it ages with current news, as
Mhm.
in like that the fact that this like seemed like a big event, that this guy um got accused of robbery unfairly, this white man, but also like he never even served, right? He never even went to prison. But so this is a huge story. This that he had to
No.
go through the experience
Yeah.
of being accused, but not actually being punished for it. I mean, in the way they try to make it seem like he was punished by his wife being punished, but she also ends up okay. So the fact that everyone just like ends up fine would not work today, because there's so many movies where this like does not end up fine for people of different races going through a
Yeah.
lot worse situations. This it just seems so slight compared to anything that we're used to these days.
Yeah.
And I think
Oh,
that's a big problem for the movie, but it's not fair because it was made in the 50s.
it is a movie that I think if you watch it in the world the movie was made, I think it's a very enjoyable movie. Henry Fonda is very good. I like a lot of parts of this movie, but I do think if you step back for a second and compare this to the current world, you're like, wait, the wrong man is a white guy who got identified off no evidence, and basically the worst thing that happened to him is his family suffered, and he like spent one night in jail.
He didn't get to call his wife.
He
That
got
was
to go.
shitty.
He got to go back to his job playing
Yeah.
music. He didn't lose his job. He didn't lose his house. He didn't really
No, it
have.
ends. The ending basically just says everything was fine. No,
Although the ending is slightly inaccurate, if you go find the actual original story and read about it, his wife wasn't actually fine. That was the only long-lasting effect of this. But yeah, it is. I think it is hard to watch today because you're like, people of color with no evidence, are very just get kind of murdered
yeah, and
for
get
no.
treated a lot harshly, but it's also acknowledged that the way he gets put in the vans, they just like ask him, and they never
Oh,
handle him roughly. They like take him to stores for people to just like witness him and see if that was him. Just let him walk in on his own. It's like he's participating in his own, unveiling of evidence in a way that they're just letting him. It was a very cooperative experience. It like wasn't even that rough. It was just the trauma of maybe you're going to be punished for something you did. Just the maybe of it is scary.
well, I think the
I
idea. No, go ahead.
I understand where Hitchcock's interest is in it, because that has a lot to do with the characters and formula has done for years, which is the person caught in a misunderstanding, and
Mm.
he probably saw like this is a real life version of someone um, out of their bubble because of a misunderstanding, put into something unlikely circumstances, and how they deal with it with a normal man. But I just don't think it's as exciting of a story as Hitchcock thinks it is. He does his best at making it exciting and making it tense.
Well, it's a Hitchcock setup, but
Yeah,
the rest of the movie isn't really a Hitchcock movie because Henry Fonda is not some suave, fast talking dude that goes out and solves the mystery and finds the problem. In fact, the actual wrong man, who is the entire movie's like the thing that they're searching for the entire movie, he just shows up. Like,
he's the right man. Henry Fonda's the wrong man. Let's get
right,
this right.
right, the man they're looking for, the actual
That's the right
criminal,
man. The correct
just
man.
shows up at the end. Like nothing actually like in a standard Hitchcock movie, Henry Fonda and his wife would go looking, and then they would find this person, and that's how the movie would end. Instead, the criminal just kind of walks into another store and tries to steal it, and then, like an idiot, somehow gets subdued.
Well, he was trying to almost present this like a reporter or like a reenacting the real life events. So I don't think he was trying to like fictionalize it too much or exaggerate too much. So that's just how it happened in real life. Is the
No,
guy
no,
got caught robbing another store?
no. I understand. I'm not saying
The
he should have.
reenactment.
I'm saying that the move that is one of the reasons why the movie feels like a Hitchcock setup, but not a Hitchcock follow through. In that, because he's using this real life story and follows it relatively closely, you kind of just get this movie where something bad happens to Henry Fonda, and the conclusion of the story is just kind of random and not related to anything Henry Fonda ever did.
Henry Fonda, the character, and I think Henry Fonda also just like pretty boring. He just did not have the charm that a classic Hitchcock actor or performance would have
No,
at all.
no.
He is just
Henry,
kind of he just
the,
has
the
a
st-
really long, sluggy face. He's just like such like your
Mhm.
like boring uncle that like works in a morgue would look like.
No, but that's the thing. Most the male lead in a Hitchcock movie is suave and classy, and he's a ladies' man, and he's fast talking and fun. And Henry Fonda is the way I describe it. He's just like he has this honestness. He is so this honest goodness. He's the honest good character, and that is just the entire thing. He is just a guy. He gets up. He is nice to his family. He's nice to his wife. He goes to work. He does everything right. But that makes him a less interesting character than a Cary Grant or a James Stewart. He's just so.
There's not a lot to him, and you don't really feel anything through him. He's not a good avatar for us to go to experience because he's just so kind of base.
I think they try to use his wife to be the person who feels the larger emotions related to his arrest. But at the end of the day, he doesn't even really like. There is not a scene in this movie, and I feel like in some ways, if you made this movie closer to now, you would see this. There is not a scene in this movie where Henry Fonda is like, "What the hell are you doing?" I mean, right at the end, he does it. He yells at the guy, "Look what you've done to my wife." Beyond like Henry Fonda just being kind of sad and not enjoying it.
Like, I think that is where casting Henry Fonda helps, because it is his face that carries it, just because his face already looks so exhausted and tired and worn out, and that's what the character's supposed to go through. But that's the only way you can see any kind of emotion from this performance of character, because they don't try to. They keep him so neutral in a way because he wants to be going along with the game, and it's 1950s man. You don't want to get caught up in hysterics or freaking out. Just keep me basic.
Yeah. He's just kind of he doesn't really have a response. You almost keep waiting for the response to happen where he gets really mad about it. And that also it just like gets mad and being like, what is wrong with you guys? Your evidence is like, I randomly walked into a store and somebody said I might look like the person. Like, I mean, first off, this is the evidence level, the evidence required to consider him the guilty guy in this movie is like ridiculously small.
I do think it's some parts that hold up, like politically and relevantly, is the way it treats cops. Like cops, even though they're pretty nice to him in a lot of ways, they're still like shitty. They're just doing their job in like the shittiest way fashionable. Not to where they like really do whatever they can for him to admit he's guilty without actually knowing he's guilty. They try to trick him into making guilt in multiple ways, which is something we've seen throughout history. And they just want to close the case. So they do whatever they can, either by walking him in the store so many times to the people can convince themselves that that's what they've seen. I like the pharmacy scene a lot of watching him walk in and out. So they just kind of talk themselves in because like the cops are acting like we should know this guy. So I guess maybe that's him. So tricking that, and then the signature scene, which is where I want to compare it to Richard Jewell. But when they're trying to get him to sign it so many times until he like flubs up, and then they can call him out for it to self-recriminate himself.
Well, they heavily lean on the scale every time that they ask anyone to decide if he's innocent or guilty. Just like, I mean, let's be real for a second.
Look at this bugger. He's guilty, right? This guy, look at him.
If you're the clerk in some store and a bunch of cops walk in with a guy and go, "Do you think this person is guilty?" The average person is going to go, "Well, he's with the cops, so he probably is guilty, right?" Like, even the stupid, he writes drawer, but he doesn't write the ER on the end.
Yeah, that's what it is, yeah.
It's just like these really small details where it's like, and then they're like, "Look, gotcha," and it's like, "Are you kidding me? This is the stupidest like gotcha ever." I want to hear this.
For that scene, did you not notice how like exactly that is the Richard Jewell scene of getting him to call on the bot and say there's a bomb, and they keep having to repeat it until he fucks up? It's the same thing as keep having to write this letter. It's just the 1950s version is not calling on the phone but writing the letter. It's like the exact same scene.
It is sort of. The only problem I have with that is Richard Jewell is sketchy AF. And totally, if I was the cops there, I would have investigated this weird dude with too many weapons and like weird knowledge of like police procedure.
Henry Fonda, Richard Jewell definitely did it. Definitely.
We did not say that.
He's innocent.
That dude sued a lot of people.
If he didn't do that, that guy did something.
Well, I mean, he got kicked off of campus because he was a psycho.
Yeah.
No, but like Henry Fonda's like the problem is Henry Fonda's the opposite. Everything about Henry Fonda screams like good guy. Like he's the
Yeah.
nicest person to these cops who are like totally railroading him. And in some ways,
He might be the
it
most
makes
boring musician ever too. He's a musician. They try to say, "Oh, you lived that like crazy musician life in the jazz club." That's why he probably helps. She's like, "No, like I just play in the band. Like I don't even dance. I just like play my standing bass and I go home to my family and watch them play piano."
he is like he is really the most boring character ever because he's like, what does this guy do? He has a job. He sort of seems to like music, but he doesn't. There doesn't seem to be necessarily a lot of passion there.
Do
Um,
you think that the real life character was pissed off that Hitchcock presented him so plainly?
I feel like if you're the actual character, you're like they got Henry Fonda to play me, so I feel like you're just kind of happy about that.
Nah, that guy's like, no, I'm more of a Bogart.
I mean, to be fair, that the first scene with his wife is kind of is weird. It's weird. This is the one thing about watching 50s movies is relationships are
Age
just way less
difference?
what?
Age difference or
No. It's the age difference is a little bit, but it's also just like the way the relationships are. Like relationships now are just much more passionate and much more like at least in movies are more
they were
passionate,
allowed
more
to in the 50s. It was illegal. If they kissed each other for longer than 2 seconds in real life,
no, I know, but
they would.
that's why the first scene almost reads like father and daughter for a second there.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
It really does
Um,
because like he's really like taking care of her, but sort of in a paternalistic way.
because even in the end, so she, starts to freak out about from the stress of the incident, and she gets placed in, a mental hospital, because she kind of just completely loses her, um, like sense of reality. She's kind of
She
lost in her
blames
mind.
herself. She blames herself and then starts thinking he's guilty.
Yeah, and so even when he visits her in the hospital, it does seem so much like more paternal, like a paternal warrior trying to get her out.
Well,
Um,
going back to the first scene about talking about getting like her teeth work or whatever is just it sounds like a conversation you would hear between like a father and his teenage daughter. And it's just it's interesting watching old movies because the relationships are just very different. Um,
and the thing is, I don't even think Hitchcock is like a sexless director. I think he can do steamy shit. Like I find Moments of Psycho pretty steamy. Notorious is super steamy.
To Catch a Thief's
Mm,
pretty hot.
well, that's because Ingrid Bergman can bring the steam. But so it's I mean it's probably his fault for the lack of it, but it's not something that's consistent with him. So it makes it stranger. I'm like talking to myself and not liking this movie a lot more than I thought I did.
I actually like this movie a lot, but I do agree that there are some parts to it that
Yeah.
don't work in the context of today. And also, yeah, the relationship is Hitchcock typically has kind of hot relationships between his male and female leads, and that's kind of the sexual tension is kind of part of the mystery as the movie goes along. And this movie, it's loving, but it's not particularly passionate. Yeah, it's like yeah, I mean, it's basically the Dick Van Dyke Show. You'd walk into the bedroom and they have two beds next to each other with two different
David
nightstands.
Dickenberry kind of word that was hot as hell, but I don't know what you're talking about.
All right, I'm not saying Barry Tillman was unattractive. I'm just saying they slept in two beds.
Wait, that's what me and Sarah do.
Zach
I'm
Ford
just trying to read
exclusive.
down.
Zach Ford, they do sleep in separate beds
We
because
actually
the
sleep
cat.
in a full size bed, and I never want anything bigger. I need her close, baby.
Did the
Um,
cat steal your bed?
the cat does take up more of the bed than me and her do.
And the cat is much smaller.
Yeah, not by far. I do. There's a couple scenes I do. I say I like the pharmacy scene. I do like the opening. It really helps establish him as the boring fuck he is because it's like so. It's the liveliest part of the movie. Is the first 1 minute
Oh
showing
yeah,
him dancing throughout the bar in this really lively situation, and it's a really good camera work on how it pans through that bar till it gets to the band, and you introduce Henry Fonda playing the bass, and he kind of just ends, packs up, and leaves to his very it's purposely dull normal life riding on the bus or train. I can't remember at this point. It's been years since I've seen this, and by that I mean 3 weeks, which is a year in my life. I've lost 20 follicles of hair since then. Um, so I mean, and he goes back to his very routine, normal, you know, family lifestyle rather outside of that crazy bar of everything else happening. That puts him into that, he really is just a stable, steady guy, and that's how everyone describes him. So you are more caught off guard by that time because it also gives a contrast between that more hyper party lifestyle to this guy's just a steady man. It's good character development right out the back.
You forget the guy leaves his club. I think he's on the subway, and then he gets to like a cafe, and he goes in and orders like toast and black coffee. Just one of the more boring orders you can get.
Kick him out. You're not near my restaurant. You're too basic.
It's like, what's the least interesting, least flavorful thing on the menu? Toast and black coffee.
If you order toast,
he's just a really,
I can't trust you.
He's just a really solid guy. He's just kind of like, he's very reliable, and that's actually kind of plays into when he doesn't come home. His family's like, this is insane. He always calls. He never would not come home. Like, he's just like, he's so kind of reliable, family man, good guy, does what he's supposed to do. If you ask him to get milk, he gets milk. Like, he just kind of is that guy.
And I think that's where they try to put all the drama in. That's why it's such a wrench in their life. That's why it's so tragic. Because when you try to fuck with someone who's so steady, it messes up their norm, even though it's it could be worse.
Yeah. There's a really interesting part of the movie where they get a lawyer and they start trying to figure out how to prove him innocent. And they remember that on some of these dates when the robberies had occurred, they were upstate at some place. And they go there and they talk to this couple who owns the place, and they get the names of the people that were there with them. And then it's just this like kind of gut punch after gut punch where they keep going to places going, oh, where's this person? Oh, he's dead. Oh, where's this person? They need to prove them in the specific location. Oh, he's dead too. Like, everybody that they were looking for is dead. Although it is kind of weird they can't just get the couple who owns the hotel to say that they were there.
Yeah, I mean so when they go, they're like, I remember you being here. You're gonna expect me to remember like when or like what day it was raining. I don't know. And that was a very that really close to home. Don't ask me to remember specifics. That's really why they couldn't identify us, because they just like didn't have the books straightened out to tell you exactly what day they were there.
Basically,
it really was their fault. They should be a much more organized hotel to have exact dates of when they were staying there.
I agree. And they should rank all the guests by
how annoyed they were.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
Yeah. I rank my students, right?
We know you do. Do you have any more thoughts on this movie, Zach?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, it is weird. I like this movie. Like, I would definitely say I like this movie quite a lot. Like, I enjoy watching it. But in terms with a lot of other Hitchcock movies, I feel like there's just less to say. I feel like you watch something, Psycho or something, and there's just like a lot more Hitchcock is trying to say. And then there's even movies from this decade that we will talk about in a second that have a lot more to say. And
I think he is trying to say something in the 1950s. I think he just loses all thematic resonance 50 years through a fucked up criminal system.
It really, the message of, look at this poor kind of average white dude not getting treated correctly by the system, has no weight in a world where the penalty for a poor criminal justice system can be death, rather than your wife kind of gets depressed and you have to spend a night in jail.
Almost you can read this in a way that like they only care because it was a white normal guy. If he was not like such a steady guy, then it wouldn't be as big of an issue.
It isn't. You can definitely make that. I don't know if Hitchcock was trying to do that, but there is definitely like a weird root of this movie. You're like, if he was a partying dude at that club, would that make
this make him okay? Steady to make it of an issue? Yeah,
it makes it so black and white. Like, he is so a good guy, and what they're doing to him is so wrong. In some ways, it loses a little bit of complexity that I think if Hitchcock was not following a true story and making his own movie, I almost think you would see more complexity in the story.
Yeah, and I think the primary problem I have with this is I just had a real hard time engaging. And sometimes that's my own fault with movies. Sometimes it's just where my head is at. I said I watched this pretty, early in the day, like at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock on a Sunday or Saturday in the morning. That maybe I just wasn't fully, ready for it, and that could affect my ability to engage. But it was just a hard time to get me grasp into it. It's really not as thrilling or as like kinetic as other Hitchcock movies really can be.
See, I didn't have a problem getting into it, but I did have the thing where I got to the end of it, finished it, walked away, and like wasn't thinking about it 15 minutes later. which I feel like is not the norm of most Hitchcock movies. Most Hitchcock movies you watch, you finish, and you just kind of keeps popping up in your head over and over again, like thoughts about the movie. And I feel like this movie just didn't do that to me.
Yeah.
Well, let us move on to our second section where we talk about the 1950s run of Alfred Hitchcock. Now, this is, I think Zach will agree with me, probably Hitchcock's best decade. This is the decade where he makes Stage Fright in 1950, Strangers on a Train in 1951, I Confess in 1953, Dial M for Murder and Rear Window in 1954, To Catch a Thief and The Trouble with Harry in 1955, The Man Who Knew Too Much and The Wrong Man in 1956. That is the remake of The Man Who Knew Too Much. Vertigo in 1958 and North by Northwest in 1959. He only skips 1952 and 1957. He has at least one movie in every other year of the decade. And he makes Vertigo, North by Northwest, and Rear Window in the same decade. Commonly considered three of Hitchcock's four best movies.
Yeah, and some of his outsider favorites as well. There's a lot of people that would fight that Strangers Are Train should be top tier. A lot of people that say Dial M should be top tier. But yeah, but if you're going for the really legendary Hitchcock movies, like solid four, like the Mount Rushmore of Hitchcock movies as far as history, it includes Vertigo, North by Northwest, and Rear Window. Three of the four, and the fourth one would be Psycho.
Absolutely.
Those are like, if you're going to do a Hitchcock beginner's class, it's those four. That's three of the 1950s movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Strangers on a Train is really good, and I would suggest more people to watch that. Farley Granger, really good in that film. Really good train movie. Good train movie.
One I really need to revisit if we do end up doing a train month. I would be interested in doing it because I was a little off on it, but I saw it when I was 20 in my film history class, and I think I was just that movie has a really weird feel to it, especially the characters that I think I just wasn't used to, and how to connect with someone. Like I'm forgetting the actor's name, like his character. But I also am not a huge fan of the book, so we'll see.
I would definitely check it out again. I think that's a really good Hitchcock movie. Let's see what else for this decade. Dial M for Murder is good, but I don't think. But there's something like that's one of those ones that like I don't think it's top tier, but there are some really hardcore Dial M for Murder fans. Rear Window is my favorite Hitchcock. I'll just cop that. I love Rear Window. I think it's amazing. I think the fact that you put James Stewart in an apartment and his leg's broken, but he's a photographer, so he has a camera and he can look through the camera to try to, kind of peep at everyone. It has a little bit of a sleaziness, but it also has a really cool, like, he tries to figure out the mystery, and the fact that he has to figure out a mystery while not being able to move is really cool.
Arguably one of his most, like, homaged / ripped off movies.
There's
a lot of things that have really owed so much to Rear Window, at least that kind of voyeuristic idea of a thriller.
Absolutely.
Will live on forever. That's how a movie can go. Yeah.
To Catch a Thief, that's one of the, we want to talk hot movies. You don't like that one?
I don't like that movie. I don't like a lot of Hitchcock's later ones. I don't think he works well in more of a comedic.
It's not one of my favorites, but Cary Grant and Grace Kelly are a banger of a couple for an Alfred Hitchcock movie.
I like the other female's performance better. I do not know her name. That's
wow.
That's a good performance. Yeah. It's a lot spunkier and more energetic than what Grace Kelly was bringing. That I was able to find the energy of the film in that.
I like the remake of The Man Who Knew Too Much a lot better than the original.
Haven't seen the original, but I do like the remake because it's a great orchestra scene.
Great song by Doris Day. I find James Stewart is just really good in Hitchcock movies. For some reason, he happens to be in a lot of the best ones. Even more than I think I like Cary Grant as an actor more than I like James Stewart, but I think James Stewart for some reason really works in a Hitchcock movie. Vertigo.
I just think Hitchcock understood how important symbols are, and symbols need to be the crux of climaxes in movies.
Symbols are the best. And then, of course, the decade ends with Vertigo. Then, of course, the decade ends with Vertigo and North by Northwest.
I'm bored.
Vertigo's your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, it's by far or not by far, but I would say his most complex movie. The one that I think is most rewarding when we watch. There's other ones that are like entertaining when we watch, but rewarding as far as uncovering new things. I think Vertigo has the most layers and the most like psychological complexities to it as well. That is
That's fair.
interesting.
That's fair.
I'm
Really good
actually
movie.
fully on the bandwagon that Sight and Sound had it right on playing Vertigo over Suzuki.
Interesting. Interesting. I need to rewatch Vertigo because I feel like
I
I
did get to
really
see it
like
in
it.
theaters, and that helped a lot.
Nice, nice. That's awesome. I like North by Northwest a lot. I think Cary Grant is really good in that movie. I think the sort of spy movie aspect. He kind of, people always say, "What's the best non-James Bond?" James Bond, and a lot of people say it's North by Northwest because Cary Grant's very charming. He kind of has that seductive quality that you'd find in a James Bond. Would have been interesting. I wonder what
Really,
happened if
his truest like action movie in all the ways. Like it's still a spy movie, but it also has this great action set pieces.
amazing ones. The
They're
plane
really like
attack.
take action to the next level and what they can do creatively with set pieces. The Mount Rushmore and the plane and
Oh, it's so
the
good.
Crop Busters. Yeah, phenomenal.
The
For a reason.
Cropbuster we've definitely seen copied a lot.
Yeah.
That's another one of the Hitchcock ones where it's like this has definitely been copied a lot. What would you say is your favorite of this decade or favorite couple? Vertigo.
Yeah.
Like mine is Rear Window probably. I mean, it's really hard to get out to say anything else but Rear Window, Vertigo, North by Northwest. But Strangers on a Train, also fantastic.
What if we do Strangers Month? It's about people meeting strangers.
The Strangers.
A lot of movies about meeting strangers. It doesn't have to have strangers in the title.
That's the
This
problem
is
is
a lot better idea than when you private message me. We should do breast implant month.
To clear up, I was looking at you know how like every month has those random dumb things that it observes. I guess it was Breast Implant Awareness Month, and I tried to convince Zack that we should do.
This sounds ridiculous, but you literally sent that like a few hours after I watched Chorus Line, which has a whole song about breast implants called Tits and Ass.
Of course. Well, it's not called that. It's called TNA.
It is it. It is called that.
It's
She
called
sings.
TNA.
No, she sings Tits and Ass
Oh,
in the
really?
song.
I thought it was. Well, I clearly don't know a chorus.
You know nothing about musicals, and I'm an expert.
Oh, you are. I just performed them. You know everything about them.
Of course, that's a weird fucking movie. It would be good if it was in the 80s. The 80s like ruins that movie. The outfits are just like too much, and that's all I thought about for 90 minutes.
Welcome to our podcast covering A Chorus Line. Zack, any final thoughts on the 1950s and Alfred Hitchcock?
On the 1950s in general. The 1950s and Alfred Hitchcock.
Well, it's like you put them together.
Probably a pretty shitty decade, right? Like it had to be like when you're asked like what decade you want to live in, like no one is ever gonna say the 50s.
Why not the 50s? I feel like post-war boom.
Oh, that's like complete plastic America. That's like that's like commercialism to it. It's
fair.
Rising origins and faking the plastic family. That's what everyone paradizes. That's Tim Burton would be so mad at you for thinking 1950s needed more notice. Like it's everything he plays against. I would do the 40s just for classic Hollywood, even though
the 40s for classic Hollywood. This is just diverged into nonsense at this point. This is a great decade. If you like Alfred Hitchcock movies, you should watch movies from this decade because arguably 3 of his best 4, maybe 4 of his best 5 are all from this decade. It's kind of his killer decade. He works a lot. He works at a really high level, and it's a very impressive slate of movies. With that, I think we have finished our discussion of Alfred Hitchcock's 1950s movies, and in particular, The Wrong Man. We will be back next week when we talk about the 1960s for Alfred Hitchcock and Psycho, which is a more complex.
We definitely did not talk about Psycho yet. Yes.
Zack and I may cancel the podcast. Who knows? We'll see you next week.
Yeah.